Hello, Gary.
Hello, Guy. So we're in Munich.
We are. We're in. This is great. This is our dispatches from the road, people. It's quite like a sort of. I'm not going to say a wartime diary because you don't say. I mean, whenever you're in Germany, I don't know. This stuff just happens. But yeah, we're in Munich.
I think you mentioned it, but I think you got away with it.
But yeah, we're in Munich, which is a fabulous city, and it's a shame we don't get to see of it because we're in a park outside, and we're playing in a circus tent.
Yeah, massive circus tent, about 6,000 people, we're told. And we're right next door to the Olympic Stadium, which I think you played in once before, haven't you?
Or twice, actually, maybe. With Nick, yeah. I don't.
With Nick, and who else? Your first mod band.
But you,
with Floyd, right?
With Floyd, yeah. But I think we did. You've seen one Olympic Stadium, you've seen them all.
And also tonight, we're recording this on God knows, but I know the first semi-final is going out tonight, and we're right by the fan park.
Oh yeah.
So there might be some conflict of interest, going on between Saucerful fans and Spain fans, or who knows.
But and that in itself is quite thrilling. It's that we've been doing all these shows in Germany, and it's great to be in the country where the Euros are happening. You just get that spill, that frisson, don't you, of just being zeitgeist.
It might be better if they'd still be in the competition.
Yeah, there is that. I don't think there's anyone amongst our party who is in the taunting frame of mind, luckily.
No. So and where were we this morning? We drove in from Stuttgart this morning.
Yeah.
And we were having a little conversation at breakfast, weren't we? And I thought it was worth you mentioning because something made us think of the Quadrophenia cover. There was this piece of art in there, I suppose you'd call it, in the hotel, which had lots of wing mirrors hanging on a grid.
Right,
it was one of those hipster hotels.
Oh shit! And we never, yes, what we call the post-service generation. And we've got to say, by the way, Gary had something very unsettling waiting for him on his arrival.
I did. So
well meant, but misplaced, I think is the best way.
This hotel is called the Moxie, and I get shown to my room by the manager, and I walk in and close the door, and on the mirror, written in various crayon colours, childlike handwriting, says, "Hi Gary, welcome to the dark side of the Moxie." And it really did unsettle me, didn't it? Because no one else had anything.
No one else had anything wrong. I mean, and also
anything written.
And especially as Gary is travelling under an alias anyway. And of course, the more pedantic amongst us could actually have pointed out to the staff that we only play pre-Dark Side material.
Exactly, but I didn't know what I was awake most of the night, worried that something was going to come in my room and surprise me.
But it was a bit red rum. It was a bit red rum.
But unfortunately, it never did. No. Anyway, we were at breakfast this morning.
And we didn't. We forgot to take the bloody picture, didn't we?
Yeah, we were going to take a picture of all the band members looking into these various wing mirrors, a la the front cover of Quadrophenia. But you were telling me about a story about it, right?
Very interesting, because I'm presuming most of our listeners are familiar with the booklet that comes with Quadrophenia, the original album. If you're not, you need to go and get it and check it out, because it is possibly, I would say, the greatest sort of art-directed achievement in the history of rock music. It's an amazing...
I think that the front cover of that album is the best front cover. Yeah. My favourite front cover of all time.
But the whole story and everything, because this is where I discovered mods. I remember opening up going, what is this? And it tells Jimmy's story. But there's the first shot of Jimmy, you open it up, and there's a shot of the row of terrace houses. Then there's this fantastic, brilliantly iconic shot of Jimmy on his scooter going down Queenstown Road with Battersea Power Station behind him. Because that's actually, the history of Quadrophenia. It was recorded there and everything. And Pete...
good. Sorry, could you just elaborate on that? Where was it recorded?
It was recorded at Ramport, which was the Who's studio in Thestley Road, Battersea, which I know because I used to go and hang around there in the school holidays. Excuse me, are the Who here? Anyway, but the point is, that picture of Jimmy on the scooter with Battersea Power Station behind him is what Pete wanted to be the cover of Quadrophenia. Roger said, no, it's got to be a picture of the band. And so they did that fantastically iconic shot of Jimmy on his scooter with the dry ice and the band's faces all in the mirrors. But my point being, Quadrophenia came out in 1973. If Pete had his way and that picture had been the front cover of Gimme with Battersea Power Station behind him, then the Who would have owned Battersea Power Station.
And some other band wouldn't.
And some other band would not have been able to do their animals-themed album cover.
And the iconography of pop music universe would be really different, wouldn't it?
Really different, yeah.
You know, the whole story of, was it Roger or someone that had a rifle
Roger certainly would have had to
down.
Yeah, all that stuff, and how much is true, how much about. But Roger certainly would have had to worked a lot harder on the design for his last few tours. So how much how much that's lent on.
Anyway, any other news that's happened to us on the road recently? I don't think so. So where have we even been? I can't remember where we were before Germany. It goes like that, doesn't it?
It goes like, I mean, Paris, which is our one show.
Paris was nice.
Paris was nice. It was quite interesting. Good. We were there just before the new elections. It's funny because, obviously we're not a political show, but it's there's all sorts of stuff in the air. So
yes, we're very happy with that. And if anyone is wondering, we did our postal votes, didn't we?
We did do our postal votes, yes, because we're good citizens, or rather not citizens, we're subjects.
We are. So today, because we don't have a guest, we have put together our sort of greatest hits of drummers. So we've got Stewart Copeland on for clips from when Stewart was on. We've got Mick Fleetwood. We've got
Kenney Jones.
Kenney Jones, of course, talking about The Who and obviously Small Faces.
And then the Governor.
And finally, we've got our Governor on. We've got the Commander himself. We've got the second time we interviewed and chatted with Nick, where we were actually back on tour a couple of years ago.
That's right.
And in the UK.
Yes. And let me just say, what's interesting, listeners, is that what I'm going to be talking about, what we're going to be talking about, is before we even knew we were doing this thing about drummers, on the bus yesterday, because we've been having these chats on the bus, and we suddenly remember this is exactly where Rockonteurs comes from. And it still happens. We still do it all the time. And Gary was saying, it was a really good point you made about styles.
It started with Led Zeppelin, right?
Started with Led Zeppelin.
Yeah, so we started with Led Zeppelin. So we were talking about John Bonham. And I then suddenly realised that actually, here's a band with just one lead instrument. So it's got no keyboard really hardly any. And then just one guitarist. So and it's those kind of bands, like The who have extraordinarily elaborate drummers who play a lot of stuff, who hit hard, who go round and round the kit. They fill the space because it is tricky. If you've just got one guitar player, it's tricky to fill the space. What you need is a battalion behind you to support you, right? And that battalion, in the case of Led Zeppelin, is John Bonham. Thank you. Sorry, I nearly said Helena Bonham Carter.
That I would like to see. Something tells me they're not related. And for instance, Nick Mason is a great example of when all that space is filled, because when you've got the beautiful, orchestral sized musings of David and Rick, then you can afford to occupy a completely different space. And I would say a much more musical space.
Yeah, actually, you're right. And he just put that sizzle on top with a ride cymbal, and you're right. It was very minimal. It was very slow, tom-tom rolls. I mean, actually, in fairness, in the earlier material, in the early days, he was a bit rampant.
That's true.
But who was his influence? His big influence was Ginger Baker. That's another three-piece. That's Cream, right?
That's right, yeah.
You've just got the one electric guitar, and you've got a great big ornate drummer. So we started thinking about that as well, because there's more than that. There's who is Jimi Hendrix?
Oh yeah, Mitch Mitchell. That's another one. Actually, this has just made me think. I think there's an interesting point, which is that there is a common thread with all these drummers, Gary, which is that because the guitarists are, as a rule, they're coming from this blues R&B thing. That's what's inspiring them. Look, the drummers are checking for jazz a lot more.
Yeah.
Do you find a lot of those drums, right. Ginger Baker, Mitch Mitchell, Nick will say, they'll always talk about jazz drummers as an influence. And those guys which is a completely different world to R&B. And
all over the kit. All over
the shop there was.
I mean, they weren't playing just the one and the two, were they?
No.
That wasn't the thing. And so,
they weren't about backbeat, really, were they at all?
No, but obviously Keith Moon was filling up the space for Pete. And, well, I mean, John Entwistle was filling up the space
Well,
as well.
the irony
But-
is actually Pete is the only person actually keeping time in that band. He really is. Like,
But by the time when Keith dies and Kenney joins, it's a very different band then, isn't it? Anyway, because they've got a keyboard player on stage permanently. They've probably got a second guitar player on stage. You know, that space was being filled up, and we didn't need the whole rattle.
well, also, I think a lot of it was because, I think that might have been a lot to do with the fact that why Pete was such a very intense early adopter of synthesizers and things which had a click track, because to do the heavy lifting. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So the other band, obviously, that came to our mind was the Police.
Yes.
One guitar player playing rather sparse sort of arpeggio guitar parts, not even playing big chords. So who fills up the space? Of course, it's Stewart, right?
And of course, with that brilliantly original thing of using that reggae influence and throwing the beat into a place where we haven't heard it before, especially with that sort of music, which in itself, which is, because I would say they were absolute masters of space in terms of both leaving it and filling it. Do you know what I mean? Like both extremes.
Okay, I'm going to say Emerson, Lake and Palmer.
You can say it, but I don't know what it means. No, you're
Only because, it is only one lead instrument, isn't it? Obviously, a Hammond is going to fill up a lot of space, especially when it's got knives being stuck in it. It's screaming in pain.
Yeah, so actually, I think what we're talking about here, Gary,
Carl Palmer.
is, yes, but what we're talking about is not so much instruments as hands, as how many hands there are.
That's right. So if there are only 6 hands, it's got to be a busy drummer. What about the Jam?
I'll say the Jam and another, but there's another, and I would say there's a similarity here between Rick and Larry from U2, where it's not particularly busy and it's fantastically strict, and that's kind of what gives it the size, if you will.
Yeah. Okay. Can we think of any other 3 pieces? Any other cases of this? Have we? Budgie.
Come on.
I couldn't even tell you who the drummer was in Budgie, to be honest. I'm so sorry.
Pretty sure he was Welsh.
But maybe we've exhausted this, but maybe our listeners.
No, there's not. I'm sure. Please fill your boots on social media. Of course, there's thousands of 3 pieces that we've missed out.
Yeah. By coincidence, our first clip today is, in fact, Stewart Copeland. What's he talking about in this clip? Do you know?
Well, he's actually talking about the first time he met Sting.
There it was, shaft, light, and besides, he could sing and play bass and had a cool-looking amp.
What was the charisma?
I can remember it distinctly as just being meal ticket.
Is it confidence? Do you think it's the confidence that's
Swagger?
has?
Yeah, there's a swagger to it. And even though when we were playing punk music, the first year and a half, it was all my crap songs. My 2 chords and crap.
That's right. That's the thing.
Bass line with yelling.
Yeah.
And he hadn't started to write yet, and yet we stuck together.
You mean Clown's Revenge couldn't have got to
I played
every
him.
breath you take level.
Clown's Revenge was one of the songs I played him when he came down to London. I talked to him on the phone, and he came down to London, came over, and I played him. This is the material we got. I got this band. I hadn't yet found a guitarist, which meant that I got me, and I'm planning to find a guitarist. But since you can play bass and sing, that takes care of that. Any old guitarist who can play 3 chords is fine.
Yeah.
But he heard my demos, which I've listened to recently, and not incredibly impressive. I think it was the fast talk.
Yeah. Listen, I just wanted to, before we get properly into the Police and everything, and we were just having a discussion on our intro about, we mentioned Harry Belafonte, obviously, and we mentioned
Police,
the fact,
Harry Belafonte.
Well, he having just died, we mentioned that it was the first million-selling album, Calypso, and then there was a bit of a discussion about the first million-selling songs, and the first one, do you know?
No, I don't.
Glenn Miller.
Good for him. String of
Chattanooga
Pearls,
Choo Choo.
Chattanooga Choo Choo, of course.
And then the other one was 16 Tons.
16 tons and a da-da-da-da.
But I couldn't remember.
Well, you guys can both sing.
Who recorded it?
No idea.
Tennessee Ernie Ford.
Well, even if I had known that, I wouldn't have remembered it.
But
Exactly.
Or even if I'd remembered it, I wouldn't have known that
To be
name.
fair, that was a Google discovery.
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
He had
This is
Ford. He did have Ford.
the beginning of pop music. This was the beginning, wasn't it? Of folk
I thought
music.
it was Fats Domino. Was the first recorded backbeat. And I can't remember what the song was, but my research turned up Fats Domino recording in New Orleans was the first rock riff. That's
Oh, really? Well, no, that's probably
Can
true.
we borrow your researcher?
That's probably true.
And also, the other link, of course, the Police played the Banana Boat song, apparently.
Well,
live.
no, Sting would, because of his background on playing the cruise ships, which is where he learned his craft, by the way. You know, a lot of times stern employment.
No, hang on, I didn't know that.
What craft was it exactly?
Songwriting.
The cruise ship. Cruising. Exactly.
No, how songs are constructed. Verse, chorus,
Yeah,
verse,
I thought
chorus.
you meant sea craft. Sorry.
Yeah, right. No, he was forced to learn the hit. And, you know, this is my thesis, is that sometimes, you know, I was a film composer for 20 years. Before the mast, a hired gun, flinty-eyed. You want happy, I'll give you happy. You want sad, I'll give you... You want happy, sad? I can do that. That's not an artist, that's a craftsman. And as a craftsman, you have to go places that you would never go as an artiste. You know, one thing for me was when the director turns around, Francis Coppola turns around, we need strings. Fine. And so began a lifelong adventure with orchestra, which came out of stern employment. And so for Stingo, playing the hits on a cruise ship taught him, because he was a jazz guy, he had no interest in that music at all, but it taught him the construction of a pop song, what the pieces are. And it kind of went into his thing, and he never would have dreamed of dredging it out until the wheel turned and Prague was out and short, pungent songs were in. And I think that stern employment from his past stood us all well.
I think the thing that's fascinating about Sting's songs, and it probably comes from that, and it's a level of, listen, I think he's one of the greatest songwriters of all time. We all know that.
You want to
But
see my car.
There's always a level of storytelling that is not personal. You know, he's not really. It's putting himself in another persona, in another character, usually dark.
Well, there is some darkness there. There is pain in that heart. He is the king of that stuff, by the way.
King of pain.
Yeah, and I think that's where it comes from. That I'm just a loosey goofy guy. I bang stuff, you know. I just, you know, sure, I can bang away on a riff, but to create those lyrics needs a deeper perspective on life. And like, as you very cleverly notice, he dodges the bullet. It's not about me. It's not I love you. It's someone else loves someone. And he presents it in a way that everyone can identify with, but he kind of, you know, every breath you take is someone else being a voyeur, even though it's in first person singular.
Yeah.
But yeah, he
I
sort
always
of...
thought that was him.
You did.
Because punk was always, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that.
It was negatives. That's the whole thing.
I actually do know who and what that was about, and it wasn't him.
No,
And I ain't telling.
Oh.
We're good chuckle buddies here, but there's a camera rolling. Well, I mean,
Good to
I can
know.
tell you that it's his favorite feature of the song. Not only that it's the biggest selling single ever, the most airplay, radio played song ever when you combine the Police version and the Puff Daddy version. His favorite thing, apart from that, is that people tell him that they play it at their weddings. And it's like, but really? Have you actually listened to the lyric? But he loves that fact. And many of his songs actually have a hidden meaning. I think they're about this because I only, you know, like I say, I'm only looking at the back of his head. I'm not sure what he's singing about. But many of the times I've thought the song was about this, but actually it's about that.
But here's the thing. But the reason that songwriting got to take flight was this. One thing that comes over from the bit of the diaries we've seen is that it was you putting your foot down about punk. About
Yes,
it being punk.
I was the punk ayatollah. I was the Taliban of punk in the group, and they all, in their autobiographies since, they all talk about, well, Stewart was just on this mission. He was foaming at the mouth with this whole punk thing. True, but that was our meal ticket. There were no other gigs. There was no other scene. There was, you know, we weren't going to get airplay.
And it was early, but it was early. You were hip to it.
76. And through 77, and we starved through all those years until Andy joined. And for some reason, Sting and I stuck together in spite of, you know, we were very codependent in those days. We had a rhythm section. We knew that we rocked, and we got a lot of gigs as session players. And but we just soldiered on in spite of being spotted by the critics as carpetbaggers.
Yeah, when
fake
you say
punks.
carpetbaggers, I mean, I like this. I like the Sting came down from Newcastle. You know, it's the same journey that Bruce Welsh and Hank
It sounds
Marvin.
like something from a folk song.
Yeah.
Sting came
Down from Newcastle. Hi
Yeah,
ho.
not as good
hi
as
ho.
the one Sting would write, though. But you know, it's almost like, you know, that journey down to London was so important in those days. It's not anymore. People could make music everywhere, but London was the centre of everything, wasn't it?
I thought he came because I called him and summoned him, and he came to my door. No. He came down.
He wasn't part
anyway.
of the Jarrow March.
No, he came down anyway. He came down
barefoot.
Yeah.
But there's a great bit in the diary where you talk about that first moment he comes into your room where the drum kit is.
Yeah. And we just blaze, and he wrote the same thing in his diary, that moment was like, damn, this is the musician I've been waiting for. And we just went off into places. And we eventually did kind of grow in different directions, and we were not so codependent anymore. But when we first started out, all we had was each other. And no songs, no Roxanne, no Message in a Bottle, no Every Breath You Take. He hadn't started writing them yet.
So what were you playing?
When you're saying that,
we were playing Clown's Revenge.
Songs, but was he not writing music at all?
He had a couple of retreads from his
bass instrumental, like sort of Autumn Leaves, or kind of.
No, he had some retreads that he sped up from his jazz band, and his Newcastle jazz band, Last Exit. And there were a few, but they weren't the ones you remember now. They were sort of in that ilk, 2 chords, because our guitarist could only play 3 chords, which I showed him. Once again, that plus the cruise ships, plus being forced into this distilled, no song longer than 2.5 minutes, straitjacket, kept him kind of bottled up. But we were a great rhythm section. We just fit together with cool grooves, and we got a lot of work. And one of the sessions that we showed up for, the guitarist walks in, triple scale, legendary guitarist who probably cost the boss more than us two put together, but times 10, walks in, name of Andy Summers. And we play this kind of prog material. Mike Howlett was the boss. And
you came up the other week.
Well, it was his solo album. For some reason, he wanted 2 basses. Go figure.
I see.
Go figure. 2 basses, you'd like that.
I've tried it. I was in a band with youth with 2 basses. It's a disaster.
It's a disaster.
It's the worst idea ever.
But as we're driving home, and we're going places that we never allowed ourselves to go with the Police because we were a punk rock band.
So the 3 of you were
No,
playing
just
on
Sting
that
and I.
album? So is that, you
Yes, the 3 of us, including Andy, who
so
we
that
just
record's
met
out
that day.
there? It's out there?
20 years later, I get a call from Mike Howlett saying, remember that album that we recorded? Do you mind if I release it? I said, dude, you paid me 20 quid. It's your record. What he was really asking about, can I use the word police in the title?
Right.
And so he released it, Police Academy. And that's exactly what it is. You can hear that rhythm section, and Andy, you can hear the Police, but we're playing nothing like the music we were playing at the time. It was prog with lots of drum fills.
And are you feeling unleashed? Is it
unleashed?
Like,
exactly. And so driving home that night, Sting is seething. His musicality is just rising up. I understand that this is our mission and everything, but God, don't just a couple notes of music, please. Oh Lord, can we get that guy? Come on, Stewart, get that guy. And we can't afford him. I could indulge his fantasy.
Why was he expensive? What was the?
Well, he was.
And he was a
triple scale top jobbing.
Because he's older than
he
you
was
guys.
doing
isn't
things
10 years
like
older.
John Lord's solo stuff. He was doing all sorts of.
And Neil
is Andy 80 now?
Savoy Brown.
Yeah, all kinds of stuff. Animals.
What's he?
So
He was older. He's a 60s player.
That's right.
Wasn't he? Yeah.
That's right. And he'd been around the block. He had a huge musical education.
The next clip we've got coming up is Mick Fleetwood. Mick Fleetwood was a pretty awesome chat we had, wasn't it?
It was amazing, and that was a very, very big deal. Very, very emotional, and it seemed to be quite a big deal for him. He was fantastically open. But if we're talking about drummers, there's a man who went over, in the fullness of time, not actually as long as you think, but went on an incredible journey as a musician. If you think of the drums he was playing, with Peter Green to Rumours.
Yeah, then that discovery, I guess, one of the first sort of drummers to bring in, we're told we can't say this anymore, but world music or global music, inspired drumming.
Yeah, but also for just that very precise, pop type drum. I guess, it was like more in common with ABBA than John Mayall.
yeah, exactly. But I remember this interview being very moving as well, because there's the moment towards the end. I know Lindsay had left at that point, and Neil Finn had taken over, and that he was, he got very choked up, didn't he? And said that is what he really wants and hopes for is that all of the original members whatever original members means, as far as all of the original Rumours members can walk on stage together and perform one more time. But I think this clip we're going to play is when they were recording in a studio, and next door was Stevie and Lindsay. Mick, you know, a lot of your success is down to your vision in making choices. There's a moment in your career which is akin to, in my mind, as a fan of it all, of Paul meeting John. And it's you being in that studio and Lindsay Buckingham singing through the speakers. And that is one of the great apexes of rock history that changed so many lives. You've got to talk to us about that moment and how it felt and what went on.
Well, yeah, I remember it well. Bob Welch was still with us, who is yet another person who was a massive part of our history.
Yeah.
Sadly missed, and a dear friend. And he had left the band. But we ended a tour, and I'm surprised he didn't tell me, but I think he just couldn't tell me until the last gig. He said, well, I'm leaving the band. And he was very unhappy in his personal life. So I understood, but it was sort of not a complete shock, but it was a bit of a shock. And I was looking for, prior to that, looking for a studio when Bob was in the band. And I went up to Laurel Canyon. There's a store, which is still there, with a great documentary about.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, it's still there with pictures of Joni Mitchell and Mama Cass on the wall. And I'm woo the day they ripped that place down. And I need to go and film this story there and tell the story, because I never did it and I meant to do it. Just say, this is where it started. And I went in there, and Jenny and I were up in Laurel Canyon. I went just to get some groceries or something, an old beaten up Cadillac. I met this sort of crazy hustler type guy that I vaguely knew. And I said, he said, what are you up to? And I said, well, I'm actually looking for a studio. I've got a couple of weeks off before we end the tour for the next album. And he said, well, I'm repping an album, a studio called Sound City in the Valley. And so he knew a lot of rock and rollers. So he obviously got himself a job. And right there and then I said, well, I better just get my groceries out the back of this Cadillac, because there's no air conditioner. And the hood never worked, the top. So I shoved all my stuff in the back of his car, and I said, I'll come with you now and take a look at the studio. And that was it. Walked in the studio. Keith Olsen was there, happened to be there, who produced Buckingham Nicks. Stevie and Lindsay happened to be in the studio doing demos for the next album, which ended up being the Fleetwood Mac album, Fleetwood Mac. And I had no reason, apart from the music must have been so, in the 20 minutes, half an hour of me hanging out at the studio, vague recollect from Lindsay about sort of met me, and I saw Stevie through the window, and Keith said, oh yeah, this is the music. And he happened to put on Buckingham Nicks and said, this is the music that I made with this duo. They're in there doing demos or something. And he played a tape just for want of something to play, to hear the speakers. And that's what triggered it. I then went back on the road. Bob, after a couple of weeks, then the end of the tour, said he's leaving. And somehow in that time in the studio, it must have been so profound. And I went, that he was gone, and I knew it. I thought, well, what are we going to do? And I remembered the music. And I phoned Keith Olsen up. And I said, you know that music you played me? What's the story? Do you think they were, even with no rehearsal, they joined Fleetwood Mac with not one note played. I just fucking knew it. And I played it to John and Chris, and John said, we're crazy, we've got to audition them or something. I said, no. And they ended up agreeing because they heard the album. And I said, I think this is the right thing to do.
But wasn't it you just wanted Lindsay, wasn't it? But the deal was Stevie had to come.
I was looking for woo the day that Stevie will ever forgive me for the band. And I found out the nice part of the story is, even though I get beaten up about it, is that Lindsay made it very clear that no me if Stevie's not there. And, we were looking for a guitar player. And then very quickly, but she tends to forget, it became very apparent that she'd written half the songs, which I was more than well aware of, plus the loyalty from Lindsay with what they were doing. So they transported themselves with what they were about to do into Fleetwood Mac without playing a note.
And how did Chrissy feel about it? Because I mean, did she feel a little bit put out having this? I mean, let's face it, it's a gorgeous, beautiful, talented person coming into the group.
Christine would tell the stories like this. She said, Mick, I think, all joking aside, there's nothing worse than two women that can't stand each other, like catcalling. So do me a favor, let me meet Stevie. And we all went out to a Mexican restaurant on 3rd Street, and they got on like a house on fire. And she wasn't really serious, but she was just saying, let me at least meet my fellow lady in the band. And I said, of course, And we went out, and it was all a go, and they became and remained great friends through a whole load of unbelievable stuff when you look at the history of what happened.
Unbelievable. Because you made that album, which was a real slow burn, wasn't it? It's kind of happened back. Everything sort of happened backwards. It's like, oh, there's rumors, but then, oh no, here's all this other stuff. But that had sort of happened before. And
yeah, well,
it was a weird couple of years.
If ever there's a Broadway show, we should be able to put one on.
Oh my God.
And it still is, I've said a couple of things lately, and I don't mind, and going, it's, likelihood of it happening, in terms of burying. But I would like certain hatchets to be buried, and they really exist between Stevie and Lindsay, So we'll see.
Because you're asking divorced people to be creative together, aren't you? And that's tough.
That's what the making of Rumours. All of us, including Amy's mother, Jenny, we'd broken up, and I was in pieces, and I'm sure she was too. It was a mess. So everyone in the band was completely disengaged from their partners while we made Rumours. And it's almost an impossible task. I had Warner Brothers phoning me up going like, just be truthful. Tell me when the band's breaking up. I said, no, we're going to make it. We're going to make it. And the music took care of that. But like Lindsay said years later, and I get it, he said, we were never able to heal.
But do you think that's part of the the success is because of the amount of pain and honesty that goes into the songs, and the relationships between the people playing it is why that, there's something about that album. It's like Dark Side of the Moon. It's entered the popular subconscious in a way that other records just haven't.
Do you know what I think it is, Guy? I think because their experiences was going into so deeply into the music that what you hear on that album is utter truth.
And that's that resonates with the wider world. But no matter if you know what's making it happen or not, there's an honesty and a pain in it that makes it real and makes it makes it truth. That's what true art is, isn't it? Someone sharing their truth.
I have to agree, and it's part of the sort of the long story of Fleetwood Mac, and I do like to think that. Well, I not do like to think. I know that existed in the beginning of the band with Peter, and the whole thing is no doubt a survival story, which is really beyond belief. We shouldn't have earned the right to survive, really, but we did, and we have, and it's all somehow connected to an honesty that was not planned, that ends up with being human and vulnerable, and outside of the music. Sometimes foolishly so, we revealed way too much with what was really going on in the subtext of a lot of stuff. But we did, and sort of paid the price. It was very hard to do an interview without talking about who's creeping down the corridor and sleeping with each other, when really we wanted to say, well, would you like to ask something about the music? It was our fault. We were very overly open about that. However, the end result is it's actually been a plus, because people look to the experience of whatever it is under the heading of this funny band called Fleetwood Mac, is that it has, my dad would say, like, no matter what, it's been worth a damn. And with all of the pain and all of the things where you go, like, sometimes, especially me, but John would go like, should we have kept it going? It's like so much heartache sometimes, but I don't feel that in retrospect. I think it's all been worth a damn. And it's all, when we walk on a stage, God knows we hope it's about the music, and we believe it is. But there's also something else. And I think that became part of our story, which was a problem earlier on, but it is not now. And I think it becomes very meaningful for especially young people to grab onto a body of work that they can really see people as a major subtext to it. There are some bands that just, it's the band, but there's not a super emotional, especially what caused it was the man and woman, the love and the no love, the dysfunctionality thing was unique.
Right, so next up, Kenney Jones. Now, here's an interesting one, going back to what we were talking about earlier, because, Kenney Jones, one of the great mainstays of the 60s and 70s. But very interesting thing in that here's a thing of where, styles don't always necessarily translate. Because for me, The Who never really caught fire when he was playing with them. And I think he'd be the first to admit it. And Roger always had a problem, didn't he? Because basically, I'll tell you why, because he was a drummer. And Roger just couldn't get used to having a drummer behind him, as opposed to just an insane percussion department of an orchestra.
Well, you get a feeling with there's a sort of like the flashing of knives is the way he plays his drums, isn't it? And and maybe Roger coming from the street, he's used to having a gnarly sod standing behind him, isn't he? And
challenging him basically, wasn't it? It's
challenging him, yeah. But I also think, in fairness to Kenney, I think
I no way am I besmirching
Pete wasn't it. Pete was probably not at his best at that point anyway. I don't think the Who were making their best records at that point when Kenney joined.
Well, I remember, in fact, Kenney, because Kenney played on I think I played a bit on Empty Glass, Pete's solo album. But when I remember, there's a great quote from Kenney Jones saying when he heard the Empty Glass songs, he just said, "You've kept the best songs for yourself."
Yes, which was probably absolutely true. And in fact, just to mention one of the albums I've been really enjoying again on this tour has been the Cowboys' Eyes,
All the best
Chinese Eyes.
Yeah.
All the best Cowboys have Chinese eyes.
Yeah.
Pete's solo album, which has been
was he thinking
re-released.
about with that title? I mean,
no, you know what? I got mixed up then, because as I was about to say it, I thought, are you allowed to say this anymore?
It's problematic, but it always was problematic. I mean, this amount, his titles are great. Quadrophenia, Tommy, Sell Out, and then this. Come on, Pete.
Yeah, but what an album! What an album of songs that is! What an album! So, who's the drummer on that band?
Well, no, it's various. It's Simon Phillips is doing. No, let me check. Mark Brzezinski. I was doing a lot of it. This has got the sections of Mark Brzezinski and Tony Butler, who work really well together.
Anyway, we digress. Let's just move away from where we were with the Who and go to where Kenney was at this point in our conversation, which is with the Small Faces, right? So, what a band that was. What a band. With Steve Marriott's voice. Have you heard about all the AI stuff with Steve Marriott?
Yes.
That's been upsetting his family.
Yeah.
So it's quite understandable. Apparently the manager or someone, whoever partly owns the estate now, has decided to take some of the demos and the unfinished stuff and to finish it using AI that will take Stevie's voice, and then you can sort of write lyrics for the new AI version of Stevie to perform. And obviously, his family, his daughter in particular, are completely against this. And I can understand why someone's against it. This because in the end, it will all get mixed up, and some people will think it's real, and some people won't be sure about what's genuine or not, and then everything's in doubt.
But the problem is, I think, this is the problem now. But you know what? In 10 years' time, we'll all just be doing it on our phones to anyone we want. Yeah, give me Frank Sinatra if he wrote with Kurt Cobain. It'll be rubbish, but
3 words for you, and then we'll go to the clip. Nuts Gone Flake.
Yes.
Let's talk about Ogden's Nut Gone Flake.
Yes.
Because
Ogden's Nut Gone Flake.
Mate, to go into this is one of the first concept albums, or the second side of it at least, is what you'd call a concept album. I suppose it has a story.
I was saying it's more like, it's kind of like a quick one in a way, isn't it? In that you've just got a mini operetta
sort of thing.
I only know one
stuck
quick
on an
one.
album.
But it's about a kid who's lost the moon or something, is looking for the other half of the moon.
Just looking for
Were you all on acid or something, Kenny? What happened?
Many different things. But what happened was, how it came about was when we were on Immediate Records, Andrew Oldham said, you've got to go and write some songs, guys. So I fixed you up a boat each. I fired a boat each for you on the Thames. So
of course.
So we went, yeah, great, lovely. So we ended up with a boat each. It's another story in itself. That is funny.
Why a boat each? Surely you want to be on a boat together.
No. We took our girlfriends with us and stuff. No, it's like a caravan, on the sea, on the water. So we ended up having a great weekend, bashing into different boats, and I didn't understand tides and anything like that. So, currents and stuff. The only current I knew was in my mum's cupboard. So I found myself
with your bananas.
Yeah, bananas. Trying to turn the boat around, and ended up drifting into a disused destroyer that this family were living in. Converted it into a home, and I went for sailing into the side of it, into the port. I remember my face hit the port, the windscreen of the boat landed over my head, and my face was pressed up against the porthole like that. And inside was people eating their Sunday dinner. So that was my experience of being a sailor. Then Mac was he was sailing. I was behind Mac in my boat, and then I could see this other boat coming towards Mac in his boat, and this guy was it was like a sailboat with the sails down, and he was on the front being so proud. This guy, he was dressed in white, had a white hat, white shirt, white shoes, white socks, everything was white, and he was like this, and he could see the look on his face was getting more and more concerned as Mac approached. So Mac ended up scraping down the whole side of this guy's yacht.
Oh no!
And I remember this guy was shouting out to Mac, "Scourge of the sea, scourge of the sea."
What sort of boats were they then?
Well, they were kind of little little motorboats, like a caravan on wheels.
And somehow, out of all of this, Ogden's Nutcorn Flake appeared.
I'll get there in the end. We moored up against the side of the Thames, and we lit a fire, and we thought we'd better write some songs. We haven't done anything, so nothing. We'd have to sat down to write some songs, and couldn't think of anything. So one of us, I don't know which one I said, just looked up in the moon and sort of went, "Where's the other half of the moon?" I don't know. Where's it gone? That's how it came about. Stan was Ronnie Lane's father.
Oh.
That's his name. Yeah. So, and he was always happy. Ronnie's dad. He had he's a lovely he wasn't overweight, but he had 3 double chins. So, and when he laughed, he was just all shook. He was always happy and laughing. Oh. So that's where Happiness Stan came from.
Because Stanley Unwin wasn't your first choice.
Hang on, can we just explain who Stanley Unwin is?
Well, yeah.
Stanley Unwin, he talks gobbledygook and he goes, "Are you sitting up the bowl 2 square on your body? Then I'll begin."
Yeah. Floaty-o, Deep Food.
Deep Joy. He was in a couple of movies, carry-on movies and stuff like that.
Deep Joy.
He basically invented his own take on the English language.
Yeah.
It was violin and scratchy on the catgut.
Yeah, 24 years old, go down the hot float, down the Golden Bar floaters, and all of a sudden a big float come around the corner.
Yeah, and
he used to be on TV all the time when we were kids.
Yeah.
So you got him to sort of do some little narration between each track, didn't you, on that second side?
What happened was we wanted Eric Sykes to do it. And Eric Sykes wanted to do it, but he couldn't do it. It's busy. So we ended up getting Stanley Unwin in.
So did you write the lines for him and then he just turned it into his
Well, he said when he came into the studio, he said, "Look, I just want to get to know each one of you." So we spent some time with each one of us so he could pick up on our mannerisms and stuff like that. So, blow your... Because we used to say, "Cool, man," this guy's blown his cool. That sort of thing. And so you go, "Blow your cool, man," and do this deep focus.
Wow. But this is an extraordinary record, and even today, people hold it up as being one of the most important albums in the history of music.
Well, I love it. I love my drumming on it. I think it's great.
I mean, that opening instrumental, which is really the sort of overture, is a phenomenal piece of work, and would have influenced Pete and Tommy, surely.
Well, it was actually my tune. I just because I don't play guitar, I had to hum it to everyone. No,
All right.
because
You didn't have your banjo
I
yet.
did a banjo was nowhere near it.
Wow.
So what happened was, I mean, in those days I was doing lots of sessions for other people. A lot of people wanted me to play on their records, so I just ended up doing these big band sessions. So and I found myself playing on these great big fills, orchestral fills, and I really, really got into it. I just loved these big, you know. And so when it came to doing Ogdens, I kind of took that flavour of what I learned from the studio and playing big bands, and sort of put my drumming style into that.
Yeah.
Wow. What's interesting to hear you say that, Kenny, is the fact that that's quite unusual. I mean, it's a great testament to you. The fact that because people back then, you were either a band guy or a session guy. The fact that, for a start, where did you find the time?
Well, I used to love playing with different people. And it was also very nerve-wracking at the time as well, because I couldn't read music. My girlfriend's at that time, her father was Tony Osborne, the band leader.
Oh, okay.
And he introduced me to my very first session. I said, but I don't read music. He said, yeah, you can do a session for me. I'll teach you how to read music. I said, you can't teach me in 5 seconds flat. He said, yes, come out. And he's flat with his wife by then. So he said, come round to my flat. So I went round to his flat. I said, look, there's show me the piece of paper you write music. He said, look, that's a bar. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's a bar, yeah. And that line, top line is your cymbal, and that one's down your foot and your bass drum. I said, I'm not going to pick all this up in time. He said, yeah, just concentrate. Played the song that I was going to play on the next day. And it was in Trident Studios. It just built Trident Studios in Mordor Street.
So in Soho.
I ended up below the control room. The control room was upstairs. Below the control room was a rhythm section. In the rhythm section was Herbie Flowers on bass and Big Jim Sullivan on guitar.
Wow.
And little me sitting in between them.
Oh,
so
wow.
they just sort of, they were great guys. I tell you, Herbie was.
Yeah, we should point out Big Jim Sullivan was one of the absolute great named session players.
Oh, yeah, and Herbie Flowers was as well.
Yeah.
But
Bowie.
It's only for our audience, because I think people know Herbie Flowers because of Bowie and Lou Reed.
That's right. So
but
they made me feel really comfortable. Then the brass section was there, the string section was over there, and all kinds of stuff, and the harps. And my father-in-law at the time, standing on the bandstand, right, boom, 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 with his stick, So we're going to play it. So now, he looked at me, just gave me a wink and said, right, okay, we got to play. So we're playing away, getting to play the song. And we're playing it, and just get to this part where we go, ba, 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 boom. I was playing away, and suddenly I went, ba, 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 and the whole orchestra did the same thing with me. I went, ba, ba, and I stopped playing. I went, fuck. And Tony Osborne, my father-in-law, said, what'd you stop playing for? I can't believe everyone did it at the same time as me, but I from this little bit of paper.
From this little bit of paper. What was the song for? What was the recording for?
I don't know, something like Eartha Kitt, something like that.
But Pete asked you to play on the Tommy soundtrack, didn't he? Instead of Keith. That must have been a weird one.
Yeah, Keith was he was kind of known for being out of it now and again. So
and Ronnie's on Tommy as well, isn't he?
Ronnie's on bits.
Ronnie Wood, yeah.
So I ended up playing on Tommy in the soundtrack.
We've skipped the faces.
No,
I was too far.
I was still in the faces when he asked me to do that.
Yeah. But after with Ogden's Nut Gone Flake that comes out, incredible cover as well. It's a round cover. I mean, everything about this is unique.
In fact, where did the title come from?
Once we finished the album, we were looking. We had a little flat called in Pimlico. Everyone used to come around and smoke weed and go. I ended up looking down at this tin after figuring out what kind of talking about what album cover we could do. So we all looked down and looked at this tin, and the lid was on the side, and the tobacco is called Ogden's Tobacco, pipe smoking tobacco. It was great for rolling your joints. And the packet of Rizzlers, right, which we ended up turning it into sus, like instead of calling it Rizzler, we call it sus, like sus, S-U-S, suspect.
So it was a nod to sort of taking drugs, really, the Ogden's Nut Gone Flake.
Kind of. So what it is. So,
well, you did that a lot, didn't you? You had some pretty influences in your songs. Yeah, exactly.
We took the tin. I thought that's a great. We like the cover of the tin, so we said, okay, we'll call it Ogden's Nut Gone Flake. So When you smoke your joints, it makes your nut go.
I never knew that. That's fantastic.
So that's how the album cover came about. The bit in the middle, when you open the cover, there's a medieval sort of drawing, and that was a friend of Mac who did that.
But you never got to play it live, did you? Well, not really.
Oh, was it once? You did it once, didn't you?
No, that was all Mymington, the bloody thing.
Ah.
And
that's what was driving Steve mad, wasn't it?
all of us. I mean, by this time it had lots of commercial records out, and it was driving us nuts because we could not lose this teeny bopper image. And if you listen to, that's why I like this album so much, because of the discovery of it. Because basically, I often wonder what kind of music we would have turned into.
The live album, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, the live album is going. Which we could say, which we've both been listening to, by the way, and the energy on that is just phenomenal.
It's very, very much freeform. There's one title song called "Oop Oopy Doo," and I don't remember. I think it's a stupid title, "Oop Oopy Doo."
But it was all getting quite adventurous because one of your last singles, The Universal, Steve recorded it in his garden on a cassette, and you could hear the dog barking and everything.
Oh, yeah, that someone just sent me that this morning when I was opening my mail, looking how to get onto the net with you guys.
Oh, right. But
Universal.
But what happened then with Steve leaving? What? How did you feel at that point when it felt like things were collapsing around you?
Well, it was a hard breakup basically, because when it happened, we none of us were really surprised, but we were surprised in the way that Steve did it. We were at Alexandra Palace, and I think it's New Year's Eve, something like that. And Steve just threw his guitar down and walked off stage and left us there.
Wow.
That's what, didn't he say I quit or something as he left?
Yeah.
But this seems like, but you have very much, this is the problem with a lot of, it's a very English thing, this, because I remember Nick said the same thing in interviews with Pink Floyd, is that most problems just like this come from people just not talking to each other.
Exactly.
If you just had a chat about,
Well, I'm kind of, when I joined New York, I've always been jealous of of bands that have stayed together, like the Stones and somewhat the Beatles and the Who. It's Genesis, really. You can overcome any problem if you talk to each other. And there's enough room in music for everyone to go off and do their solo stuff and still come back to the band.
So our final clip is going to be the guv'nor, as we said, Nick Mason himself. He's 80 now. He stands behind me and you most nights, playing extraordinary level of drumming. I mean, last night, how good was Astronomy Domini last night?
It was amazing. It was amazing. And I need to point out that this is all a lot. I think last night was the 506th show I've played with Nick. I've got to point out all the drumming he does with this band is like 10 times more demanding than anything he used to do on our Pink Floyd shows, because we didn't play any of this stuff, and this is, it is mind blowing that he can do.
Yeah. I did say on the 501st or the 501 that you should have worn Levi's on stage.
And then got in the bath.
Or done a Nick Cayman and taken them off and put them into the bass drum. No, I don't know. It kind of worked in the moment.
Sorry, no, very good. Yes, you probably had to be there. I thought it was a valiant effort. I'd like to say something about Nick, though, because there's an interesting, and a lot of this has come about from talking to musicians since this band has been going, like people like Jeremy Stacey and all your kind of, big name drummers now, is that there was a thing in the 80s, right? It was everyone wanted to be like Vinnie Colaiuta or Simon Phillips or Jeff Beccaro, and everything was about Big Flash. And Ringo, there was this sort of thing of like, Ringo, well, he was great for the Beatles and all that. And then in the 90s, there was this sudden turnaround, there was this sudden reappraisal, and everyone suddenly went, actually, no, Ringo, that's actually the shit. And it has been ever since. Ringo, I would say, has his rightful place in the drum firmament. And I would say in the last few years, the same thing has happened with Nick, is that people have actually twigged. They've turned around and gone, actually, fucking Nick Mason, man.
Well, he went through a difficult time on those, I mean, in fairness, on those Floyd tours without Roger that you did in 87, 94. in that there was a second drummer on stage, Gary Wallace. He was very 80s.
It was very, very 80s. I mean, I always used to defer to Nick, and a lot of the material required that. But that affected Nick's playing. In that, I think, there's something in that's why I find this band so thrilling. In that, it was just he was performing with a net. Do you know what I mean? It was like he was doing his stunts with a net.
Who's Annette? Who?
His wife? No, it was.
Yeah.
Still got it. But no, you know what I mean. It was just that, and he was never on his own. So.
Yeah,
but I just think I don't mean. I just in terms of his style. I guess it's. It's interesting how music just gets reappraised, doesn't it? People suddenly realise it's like Gary Wallace, for instance, is the man who will say he's got $1 million ride, $1 million ride symbol. It's just like, you can't do that. Only Nick Mason can do that.
So here is the man with the $1 million ride.
It's got the GTO, which is a $30 million ride.
You guys recently got together and became Pink Floyd again with David and made this incredible record. Could you just take me through, Nick, of what you know about how you were asked?
I got a call from David. That's quite a rare event, and he explained very roughly what he wanted to do, and I was always a little cagey about, because time was short. We were about to head off on this particular trip, and there was something else that I was doing at the same time, which was some sound effects for something, which needed to be finished for an opening. And I said, but in principle, it would have been truly dreadful to have turned down that opportunity.
And did you think it was a David solo record at the time, or did you know?
Yeah, no, I thought maybe he was doing it as a solo piece, but I'd be very happy to play on it. And then once he sent me a demo, a sort of rough version of it, and I thought, I can do this.
Did you play along in your studio at home?
I just
turn up on the day,
more or less tapped my.
Who brought all the gear down for you, or was it David's drum?
No, Dave organised that.
Okay, and what about you, Guy?
Well, no, I'm just finding I've got a text here, which I got, and it was quite. So I was actually in Manchester. It was my son Stanley's 20th birthday, and I was having dinner with him. And I got this text saying, "Hi Guy, are you busy in the next few days? And is Nick M around at the moment? I want to record a song for Ukraine." And it was literally 15 days after that it came out.
And 2 days after that, it was number one in how many countries?
Yeah, 29.
So what was it like turning up and recording? How was because you had Nitin Sawhney was on it as well.
Nitin Sawhney, yeah, turned up on the. I'd gone round there for dinner the Saturday night before, and so David had played with his original idea for it, and we're still messing around with like lengths and stuff like that, and it was fantastic. So in fact, I put a rough bass on it then, so in the hope that David would tell me all the things he didn't like that I was doing, so I could get that out of the way. But it was fine, and then I just sat at home learning it for days, and then on the day I remember even that video you see is when it was recorded.
So did you have the guy singing his piece while you were in your headphones?
On the headphones.
And I remember getting there and sort of still wasn't actually sure that you'd turn up. I'm just suddenly thinking he might change his mind. Please don't.
I had a conversation with Dave because it's a very, from the drums point of view, relative simple, but
it's you.
But it's me. And then I'd said maybe we could have a breakdown in it.
Yeah, that was
fills.
Absolutely inspired.
And Dave said, "Yeah, that's a good idea."
I'd say Guy phoned me and he said, "It sounds like Floyd. It's more Floyd than Floyd."
Yeah.
And he was very excited.
I was very excited. Well, Sarah Lee, who was taking pictures on the day, she said, "Oh my God, the pictures I've got of you." She said, "You look like the kid whose parents have just got back together."
But you know what? The reason it sounds like Floyd, and I have to say, because we've heard David's solo albums a lot. We all love David's guitar, and we know that. But it's this man here, right?
Yeah, it is. It's the way the drums sit,
And it is a joy playing with you, Nick, because you have Ritardando is a musical term, isn't it? Where you kind of pull and push the timing of a track.
Yeah.
My son, who's doing a degree in music, is going to obviously correct me on this, but that sort of ebb and flow that you put, rather than modern drummers who have grown up on machines.
Yeah, well, there's also a very interesting idea that American drummers play on or even fractionally ahead, and English drumming always tends to be pulling back.
But you do that exception, and I wonder where that comes. Was it ever a conscious thing?
No, but it's interesting that possibly my favourite rock drummer of all time is Mitch Mitchell, and Mitch definitely does a sort of he holds it back a lot.
Well, I think it's actually, I've only really noticed this since we've had this band going, but I think I've found the secret to your timing, which is that I think you actually count in half the time everyone else does. So you give yourself this enormous space between beats, which is why you can slip between time.
Where we're all going
That's
1,
brilliant.
2, 3, 4.
And he's going 1, 2,
right,
3.
Right.
So what happens between that 1 and 2 is completely up for grabs.
Nick, thank you for doing this with us.
Yeah, brilliant.
I think it's time for us to go to catering. But
The call of catering.
But it's, I mean, I just want to say, to your face, what a thrill it is to be on the road with you. You created certainly things in my life that have inspired me forever musically, and I still go back to. And to actually be up on stage playing some of those tracks, wow. And you've had that in spades, haven't you, guys?
In spades. Oh, and it's just wonderful. It's just so great to be back finally doing this. It's brilliant.
It is. We are going to try and keep this going, aren't we?
We are, yes. We are going to try, yeah.
For those of you followers who are worried. So we do have people lined up, and Ben, our producer, is going to find us on days off and try and connect us with other musicians. And we do have some good names coming up. That I know, and we're just going to keep doing this.
We're going to keep doing this, but now we know the songs.
Yeah, we've got a bit more. We can relax a bit more. Exactly. But thank you for listening. I want to thank Steve, who's our out front guy, front of house
engineer, who's amazing engineer, and we're about to find out just how good a recording engineer he is.
He's sitting there terrified in case none of it came out. And I'm keeping our fingers crossed that we will be here next week.
Well, hopefully it will be next week, yes.
Thank you for listening.
Good night from him.
And it's good night from all of us here.
Rockonteurs is produced by Gimme Sugar Productions for Warner Music Group UK.